The transport ship touched down on Kidara Prime just as the sun began to rise over the purple forests. Jake Morrison stood at the landing ramp, breathing in the alien air for the first time. It smelled like pine and something sweeter, like honey mixed with rain. Behind him, 200 colonists waited nervously for his signal. This was humanity's newest home, their fresh start among the stars. Sophie Carter joined him at the ramp, her scanner beeping softly in her hands. She had been his friend for 15 years. Through 3 colony missions before this one, her dark hair was pulled back tight, and her green eyes scanned the horizon with practiced caution. The readings showed exactly what they hoped for: clean water, breathable air, and no signs of dangerous predators nearby. The first week passed without trouble. The colonists built their main compound near a clear river, surrounded by tall trees that swayed in the gentle wind. Children laughed as they played in the grass, which felt soft like earth grass but grew in shades of blue and violet. The farmers started planting their first crops. Engineers assembled solar panels and water purifiers. Everyone believed they had found paradise. Danny Price led the security team on daily patrols around the settlement. He was young, only 23, and this was his first assignment off Earth. He carried his rifle everywhere, checking it 3 times each morning. Sophie told Jake that Danny was too nervous, too quick to see threats where none existed. Jake made a note to speak with the young man, but he never found the time. That mistake would cost them dearly. On the 8th day, they discovered they were not alone. Kyle Bennett was collecting plant samples 2 miles from the compound when he saw the prints. They looked like wolf tracks, but much larger, almost the size of his hand. The prince walked on 2 legs, not 4. He took pictures and ran back to tell Jake, his heart pounding in his chest. Within an hour, Sophie had confirmed what the tracks meant. Kidara Prime had intelligent life. Jake called a meeting of the senior staff. They stood in the command center, a prefab building that still smelled like new plastic. Helen Grant, the colony doctor, argued they should try to make peaceful contact. She was in her 40s, with gray streaking through her brown hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She had treated refugees on 6 different worlds and believed most conflicts came from fear, not hatred. Danny disagreed strongly. He paced back and forth, his rifle strapped across his back. "We don't know if they're friendly," he said. "We need to secure the perimeter first, maybe even relocate to a more defensible position." Jake listened to both sides, then made his decision. They would try peaceful contact, but the security team would stay on high alert. Sophie would lead a small group into the forest at dawn, carrying gifts and translation software. If the natives seemed hostile, they would retreat immediately. The natives found them first. Kessa moved through the trees like a shadow, her gray fur blending with the bark. She was young for a scout, barely past her coming-of-age ceremony. The elders had chosen her because of her sharp eyes and quick mind. She had been watching the strange creatures for days, these beings with no fur and strange coverings on their skin. They built impressive structures and made loud noises with their machines, but they seemed weak and slow. The Alpha, Threx, had sent her to make first contact. She was supposed to approach peacefully, show her teeth in the traditional greeting, and offer the symbol of friendship that her people had used for thousands of years. Kessa practiced the gesture as she walked, touching her claws to her chest and then extending her hand forward, palm up and teeth showing. She found the strangers near the river. There were 5 of them, including the one who seemed to be their leader, a female with dark fur on her head. Kessa took a deep breath and stepped out of the trees. She touched her chest and extended her hand, showing all her teeth in the widest smile she could manage. Sophie saw the creature emerge from the forest and froze. It stood 7 feet tall, covered in gray fur, with a wolf-like face and golden eyes. Its mouth opened wide, showing rows of sharp teeth. She recognized it as an intelligent being, not an animal, and started to raise her hand in greeting. Danny saw a monster. He saw teeth and claws and something charging at his commanding officer. His training took over before his mind could catch up. He raised his rifle and fired 3 times. The sound echoed across the river like thunder. Kessa felt the impacts before she heard the noise. Something hot punched through her shoulder and side, spinning her around. She fell to the ground, confused and in pain. She had done everything right, shown the peace greeting exactly as the elders taught her. Why were they hurting her? Morvrin burst from the trees. They had been watching from hiding, ready to help Kessa if needed. When they saw her fall, their hunting instincts exploded into rage. They moved with terrifying speed, covering the distance to the humans in seconds. The fight lasted less than a minute but felt like hours. Sophie dragged Danny back toward the compound, shouting into her radio for help. Kyle tried to help one of the other scouts who had been shot, but a Vryn warrior knocked him aside with one powerful arm. The warrior bent over the wounded human, checking if he still breathed, then gently picked him up. Jake arrived with reinforcements to find 3 of his people dead and 2 others badly wounded. The wolf creatures were gone, vanished back into the forest like ghosts. Blood stained the riverbank, both human red and Vryn blue mixing in the soil. That evening, they found a message carved into a tree near the compound. Sophie's translation software took an hour to decode it, but the meaning was clear. Blood for blood. The pack comes at the new moon. Threx carried Kessa back to their village himself, his massive arms cradling her gently. Her 2 cubs, Rin and Mika, ran alongside him, whimpering with fear. They did not understand why their mother was hurt, why she smelled of blood and pain. Threx's heart burned with rage. But when he looked at the cubs, something else stirred too, a feeling he could not name, something that whispered this war might destroy more than just enemies. The pack elders met in the Great Hall that night. They voted unanimously for blood feud. The humans would pay for their violence. The pack would attack at the new moon 3 days away. Threx agreed, his voice hard as stone, but his eyes kept drifting to Kessa's cubs as they curled up beside their unconscious mother. Both sides prepared for war, certain they were in the right, certain the others were monsters. Neither understood how close they had come to peace or how a simple smile had been mistaken for a snarl. The countdown to the new moon began. Helen could not sleep. She lay in her quarters staring at the ceiling, replaying the attack over and over in her mind. 3 people dead, 2 more in her medical bay with injuries that would take months to heal. And somewhere in that forest, the alien they had shot was probably dying too. She had been a doctor for 22 years. She had taken an oath to heal, to preserve life wherever she found it. The oath did not say anything about species. It did not say only heal humans. It said life. All life. At midnight, she made her decision. She packed a medical bag with basic supplies, bandages, antiseptics, pain medication, and a portable scanner. She knew human medicine might not work on alien biology, but the basics were universal. Stop the bleeding. Prevent infection. Keep them breathing. The hard part was getting past security. Jake had put guards on all the exits, and nobody was supposed to leave the compound after dark. Helen stood in the shadow near the east gate, wondering how to slip past when someone touched her shoulder. She jumped and nearly screamed. "Going somewhere, Doc?" Kyle stood behind her, wearing dark clothes and carrying a backpack of his own. The young botanist smiled nervously. "I know that look. You're planning something medical and probably stupid." Helen considered lying but decided against it. "There's an injured alien out there. Maybe dead by now, but maybe not. I have to try." Kyle nodded like he had expected this. "You'll need a guide. I've mapped most of the forest within 5 miles. Also, you'll need someone to watch your back." He pulled a small pistol from his pocket. "I'm a terrible shot, but maybe I can scare something away." They slipped out through a maintenance hatch that Kyle had discovered during his plant surveys. The forest at night was beautiful and terrifying at once. Bioluminescent plants glowed soft blue along the tree trunks. Strange birds made sounds like wind chimes in the branches above. Every shadow could hide a predator or an angry alien warrior. Kyle led them northeast, following markers only he could see. He explained in a whisper that the aliens had left a trail. Not a careless trail, but one meant to be followed. "They want us to know where they went," he said. "It's a warning. Stay away from our territory." They walked for 2 hours before Kyle stopped suddenly. "Do you smell that?" he asked. Helen sniffed the air and caught it. A sharp metallic scent mixed with something like wet dog. Blood. They were close. The small clearing appeared through the trees like a secret room. Helen saw the injured alien immediately. She lay on a bed of soft leaves, her breathing shallow and quick. Her gray fur was matted with dried blood around her shoulder and side. Bandages made from plant fibers covered the worst wounds, but they were soaked through. 2 small creatures huddled against the injured alien's side. They looked like wolf puppies but stood upright on 2 legs. Their eyes were too intelligent for simple animals. When they saw Helen and Kyle, they bared their tiny teeth and made sounds between a growl and a cry. They were trying to be fierce, trying to protect their mother, but they were clearly terrified. Helen knelt slowly, keeping her movements calm and steady. She had treated frightened children in war zones before. The principle was the same. Show no threat, make yourself small, speak softly. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here to help. I'm a doctor." The cubs did not understand her words, but something in her tone made them hesitate. Helen opened her medical bag slowly, showing them each item before she used it. The portable scanner beeped as it analyzed the alien's condition. The results made Helen's heart sink. Infection was spreading. Without treatment, the alien would die within hours. She worked through the night while Kyle kept watch at the edge of the clearing. Helen cleaned the wounds with antiseptic, grateful when the alien did not wake up screaming. The pain medication she had brought was designed for humans, but she adjusted the dosage based on body weight and hoped for the best. The cubs watched everything she did. Their growling slowly stopped. They tilted their heads when she pulled out different tools, curious despite their fear. Helen found herself talking to them as she worked, explaining what she was doing even though they could not understand. "This is going to help fight the infection. This bandage will keep everything clean. Your mom is strong. She's going to be okay." Around 3 in the morning, the alien's fever broke. Her breathing steadied and deepened. The cubs made a sound like a happy whine, touching their small hands to their mother's face. Then they looked at Helen with something that might have been gratitude. Helen felt exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. She had been awake for 20 hours straight, and the adrenaline that had kept her going was finally wearing off. She leaned back against a tree, planning to rest for just a moment before heading back to the compound. The smaller cub approached her first. It moved slowly, carefully watching her face for any sign of danger. When Helen did not move, the cub came closer and sniffed her hand. Its nose was cold and wet, just like a dog's. The cub made a decision and climbed onto her lap, curling into a ball against her stomach. The larger cub followed a moment later. It was bolder, climbing up her chest and settling near her shoulder. Its weight was warm and surprisingly comforting. Helen found herself stroking its soft fur without thinking, the same way she would pet a cat. The cub made a sound like purring. "Kyle," she whispered. "Are you seeing this?" "Yeah," Kyle replied from his watching position. His voice was full of wonder. "Doc, I think you just made first contact the right way." Helen wanted to stay awake. She knew they should get back to the compound before dawn. But her body had other plans. Her eyes closed, and within minutes she was asleep. The cubs shifted on her chest, finding the most comfortable position, and fell asleep too. Their small bodies rose and fell with her breathing, perfectly synchronized. Kyle sat alone in the darkness, keeping guard over the strangest and most beautiful scene he had ever witnessed. A human doctor sleeping with alien children on her chest while their mother recovered nearby. He knew this moment mattered, though he did not understand exactly how. It felt like history, like something people would tell stories about for generations. As the sky began to lighten with approaching dawn, Kyle heard sounds in the forest. Heavy footsteps. Many of them. The aliens were coming back. His hand went to his pistol, but he knew it would be useless if they wanted to attack. He thought about waking Helen, about running, about dying in this peaceful clearing far from home. Then he saw the first warrior step into the clearing. It was massive, bigger than any of the others, with black fur marked with silver streaks. Its golden eyes swept the scene, taking in everything. The injured female, the cub sleeping on Helen's chest, the medical supplies scattered around. Kyle saw the warrior's hand move to the weapon at its side. This was it. This was how it ended. Kyle stood up, placing himself between the warrior and Helen, knowing it was pointless but unable to do anything else. "Please," he said quietly. She was trying to help. The warrior looked at him, and Kyle saw something flicker in those alien eyes. Not rage, something else, something almost like surprise. The warrior raised a hand, and more aliens emerged from the trees behind it. They all stopped at the edge of the clearing, weapons ready but not raised. The big warrior approached slowly. It moved past Kyle like he was not even there, focused entirely on the scene before it. It knelt beside the sleeping human and the cubs, studying them with an intensity that made Kyle's breath catch. One of the cubs stirred, opening its eyes and seeing the warrior. Instead of fear, the cub made a happy sound and reached out one small hand. The warrior touched the cub gently, then looked at Helen's sleeping face. It reached toward her, and Kyle tensed. ready to throw himself forward even though he knew it was hopeless. But the warrior did not attack. Instead, it placed one clawed hand over its heart, then extended it toward Helen, palm up. Kyle did not understand what it meant, but he knew it was not violence. The warrior stood and turned to face its pack. It spoke in a language that sounded like growls and rumbles, but Kyle heard the tone underneath. Not anger, something that sounded almost like respect. Helen woke to find herself surrounded by aliens. For a moment, panic seized her. Then she felt the weight on her chest and remembered. The cubs, she had saved their mother. The aliens were here, but they were not attacking. They were just watching. The big warrior knelt before her and repeated the gesture Kyle had seen, hand over heart, then extended palm up. Helen, acting on instinct, placed her own hand over her heart and extended it forward. The warrior's eyes widened slightly, and it made a sound that might have been approval. The confrontation that should have ended in bloodshed ended instead in silence and strange understanding. Helen had broken every rule, disobeyed direct orders, and risked her life. But as she looked at the warrior's face, at the cubs still sleeping peacefully on her chest, she knew she had made the right choice. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is not picking up a weapon. Sometimes it is putting down everything and offering an open hand instead. Threx had not slept since the attack. His mind burned with thoughts of revenge, of justice for his wounded pack member, and the honor that had been stolen. The elders had voted for blood feud, and he had agreed without hesitation. These strangers had come to his world and responded to peace with violence. They would learn what it meant to anger the pack. He had gathered his strongest warriors as the sun set, 20 of them armed and ready for battle. They would move through the forest in silence, reach the human compound before dawn, and strike hard and fast. The elders wanted prisoners to question. Threx wanted blood. He wanted the humans to understand that Kadara belonged to the Vryn, and invaders paid with their lives. But first, he needed to check on Kessa. The young scout was his responsibility, and her cubs had been crying for her all day. The healers said she would survive if the infection did not spread, but they were not certain. Vryn medicine could only do so much for wounds from human weapons. The trail was easy to follow even in darkness. His warriors had marked it clearly, expecting Kessa to be where they had left her in the healing clearing. They moved like shadows through the trees, weapons ready, senses sharp. Threx could smell the approach before he saw it, human scent mixed with Kessa's blood. His rage flared hot. The humans had found her. They had come to finish what they started. He signaled his warriors to spread out and surround the clearing. They would attack from all sides, give the humans no chance to escape. Threx approached from the north, his massive frame moving silently despite his size. He had been alpha for 10 years, leading his pack through territorial disputes, harsh winters, and conflicts with other Vryn clans. He knew how to fight. He knew how to kill. The clearing came into view, and Threx stopped so suddenly that the warrior behind him nearly ran into his back. What he saw made no sense. Kessa lay on her bed of leaves, breathing steadily, her wounds freshly bandaged with materials that smelled of human medicine. Beside her sat a young human male, armed but not threatening, his weapon holstered at his side. And there, against a tree, was a human female with gray streaks in her fur. She slept sitting up, her head tilted to one side. On her chest, curled up like they had found the safest place in the world, were Rin and Mika, Kessa's cubs. They slept peacefully, their small bodies rising and falling with the humans breathing. Threx felt his rage crack like thin ice over deep water. The cubs, they were the future of the pack, more precious than any treasure. After Kessa's mate had died in a hunting accident last season, the pack had helped raise them. Threx himself had taught Rin how to track, had carried Mika on his shoulders when she grew tired during long journeys, and now they slept on a human's chest. His warriors emerged from the trees, weapons raised, waiting for his command. The young human male stood up, placing himself between them and the sleeping female. Threx could smell the human's fear, sharp and bitter in the air, but the male did not run. He stood his ground, protecting his pack member the way any good warrior should. Threx felt a grudging respect for that. "Please," the male human said in a shaking voice. She was trying to help. Threx understood some human words from the translation device they had taken from the first encounter. Help. The female had helped Kessa. He could see the evidence: clean bandages, medical supplies, the smell of antiseptic. The human had come into Vryn territory, unarmed except for healing tools, and saved a pack member's life. He stepped past the male human, ignoring him completely, and approached the sleeping female. His warriors tensed, ready to attack if he gave the signal. But Threx did not attack. He knelt beside her and studied her face. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and lines of worry on her forehead. Her clothes were stained with Kessa's blood. She had worked hard and long to save a life. Rin stirred in his sleep and opened his eyes. When he saw Threx, the cub made a happy chirp and reached out with one small hand. The cub showed no fear, no distress, only joy at seeing his alpha. If the human had meant harm, if she had hurt him or his sister, Rin would show the signs. Cubs always did. But the little one was content, safe, trusting. Threx placed his hand over his heart, the gesture of deep respect among his people, then extended it forward, palm up, toward the sleeping human. It was the same greeting Kessa had tried to give before the shooting. The greeting that meant, "I see you as worthy. I offer my trust." Behind him, his warriors made sounds of shock. One of them, a hot-headed young male named Vex, stepped forward. "Alpha, what are you doing?" "These humans attacked Kessa. They killed our honor. We came for blood." Threx turned his head and looked at Vex with eyes that burned like cold fire. When he spoke, his voice rumbled through the clearing like distant thunder. "The cubs know the heart," he said in the Vryn language. "Look at them. They sleep in peace on this human's chest. They trust her with their lives. Do you question the wisdom of cubs, Vex? Do you claim to know better than innocence itself?" Vex lowered his eyes and stepped back. No Vryn questioned the saying. The cubs know the heart. It was older than memory, passed down through countless generations. Cubs sensed safety and danger with pure clarity, unclouded by fear or pride or anger. If the cubs trusted someone, that trust was sacred. The human female woke suddenly, her eyes flying open. Threx saw panic flash across her face as she registered being surrounded by armed Vryn warriors. But she did not scream. She did not try to run. Instead, she placed a gentle hand over the cubs on her chest, not to threaten them, but to keep them from falling. That single gesture told Threx everything he needed to know. Even in her fear, her first instinct was to protect his pack's children. Not her own life, not escape. The cubs. He repeated the gesture. Hand over heart, extended forward. The human watched him carefully, then mimicked the movement. Her hand went to her heart, then extended toward him. The motion was clumsy, uncertain, but the meaning was clear. She understood this was important, even if she did not know exactly why. Threx stood and faced his warriors. He made his voice loud enough for all of them to hear. "I am Alpha. I declare the blood feud ended. This human saved Kessa's life. The cubs trust her. We will not harm those who protect our pack," Vex snarled in protest. "The humans killed 3 of them. We killed 3 of ours. Blood demands blood." "Blood has been answered," Threx replied firmly. "We wounded them as they wounded us. The debt is paid. What happens now is a new path. We can choose war and watch our cubs grow up in fear. Or we can choose understanding and maybe, just maybe, find that we were wrong about these strangers." He turned back to the human female and spoke slowly, hoping the male with the translation device could help. "You saved pack member. Cubs trust you. Alpha trusts cubs. Peace." He touched his chest, then pointed to her, then to the compound in the distance. "Go home. Tell your Alpha. Threx wants talk, not war." The male human translated, his voice shaking with relief. The female's eyes filled with water, though Threx did not understand why. She stood carefully, cradling the cubs as they woke up and blinked sleepily. She placed them gently beside their mother, and they immediately curled up against Kessa. Mika, the smaller cub, turned back to look at the human one last time. She raised her little hand in a gesture that Threx recognized, the wave goodbye that cubs used when they were too young for formal gestures. The human waved back and water ran down her face. Threx understood then. Not weakness, emotion. The humans felt deeply just like the Vryn did. They loved and feared and hoped. They were not so different after all. He assigned 2 warriors to escort the humans safely back to their compound. Not as prisoners, but as protected guests. The message had to be clear. These 2 were under the pack's protection now. Any Vryn who harmed them would answer to the Alpha. As the humans disappeared into the forest, Threx sat beside Kessa and waited for her to wake. He had much to think about. The blood feud was over, but the hard work was just beginning. Two species who barely understood each other, who had already spilled blood, now had to find a way to live side by side. He looked down at the sleeping cubs, at their peaceful faces and gentle breathing. They had shown him the truth that his rage had hidden. Sometimes the strongest warrior is the one who chooses not to fight. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from those too young to know hatred. The new moon rose over Kaidara, but instead of bringing war, it brought the first fragile hope of something better. Jake was ready to shoot first and ask questions later when Helen and Kyle walked through the compound gates at dawn. Two massive wolf creatures flanked them on either side, weapons visible but not raised. The guards on the wall aimed their rifles, fingers on triggers, waiting for the commander's order. "Stand down," Jake called out, though every instinct screamed at him to open fire. Helen looked exhausted but unharmed. The aliens made no threatening moves. Something had changed in the night, something important enough to risk bringing them here. Helen stumbled into the compound and immediately started talking, words tumbling over each other in her exhaustion. She told him about finding Kessa, treating her wounds, falling asleep with the cubs. She described the moment Threx arrived, how he could have killed her but chose peace instead. Kyle backed up every detail, showing pictures on his datapad of the cubs sleeping on Helen's chest. The two Vryn warriors waited patiently at the gate. Jake approached them slowly, hands visible and empty. One of them held out a small device, and when Jake took it, a voice spoke in accented but clear English. "Alpha Threx wants talk, not war. Meet at clearing where the doctor saved life. Tomorrow when sun is high. Bring no weapons." "He brings no weapons." "Only words." Jake looked at Helen. She nodded firmly. "Commander, I know I disobeyed orders. I know I put the colony at risk. But I also know what I saw. That alien leader, Threx. He chose peace when he could have chosen revenge. We need to honor that." The next 24 hours were chaos. Half the colony wanted to accept the peace offer. The other half, led by a settler named Greg Palmer, argued it was a trap. Palmer was a former military man, big and loud with scars from the last colony war on his neck. He gathered supporters in the common hall, their voices rising in anger. "They killed 3 of our people," Palmer shouted, slamming his fist on a table. "Now we're supposed to sit down for tea? This is weakness. This is how colonies fail." Sophie stood against him, her voice calm but firm. 3 of them died too. Both sides bled. Both sides made mistakes. If we don't try for peace now, we'll be fighting this war for years. Our children will grow up knowing only violence. The vote was close, but Jake made the final call. They would meet with Threx. Helen would come as translator, along with Sophie and Kyle. Danny Price asked to come too, his face pale and drawn. "I'm the one who shot first," he said quietly. "I need to face what I did." They arrived at the clearing an hour before noon. Threx was already there with Kessa, who stood on shaky legs but smiled when she saw Helen. The cubs, Rin and Mika, ran forward immediately, chirping with joy. They climbed on Helen like she was a favorite aunt, and she laughed despite her nervousness. Threx performed the gesture, hand over heart, extended forward. Jake mimicked it, and the big alien's eyes showed approval. They sat on the ground in a circle, humans on one side, Vryn on the other, with the cubs playing in the middle like a living bridge between worlds. The talking was difficult at first. The translation devices helped, but words only carried part of meaning. Threx explained the greeting that Kessa had tried to give, how showing teeth was a smile among Vryn, not a threat. Jake explained that direct stares were not challenges for humans, but signs of attention and respect. Danny sat apart from the group, his shoulders hunched with guilt. Finally, Kessa approached him. She knelt down and looked directly into his eyes. Through the translator, she said, "You were afraid. You saw danger where I meant peace. I was afraid too when the pain came. Fear makes us all do things we regret." Danny's voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I didn't understand. I just reacted and people died because of me." Kessa placed a clawed hand on his shoulder. "My cubs teach me something. They forgive quickly because they do not hold hate in their hearts. Maybe we learn from them." She showed her teeth in what Danny now understood was a smile. "You want to learn our ways? I teach you. You teach me your ways. We make sure this never happens again." Over the following weeks, the colony transformed. Sophie organized joint patrols with Vryn scouts, learning their tracking methods while teaching them about human technology. Threx visited the compound regularly, his massive presence no longer frightening but reassuring. He and Jake spent hours planning how their peoples could coexist, mapping out territories and discussing resource sharing. Helen and Kessa became close friends. The Vryn taught Helen their language, a complex mixture of growls, chirps, and body language. Helen taught Kessa about human medicine, and together they started working on treatments that combined both species' knowledge. The cubs visited the compound almost daily, fascinated by everything human. They learned to play catch with human children, taught them Vryn games in return. Ryn, the larger cub, developed a love for human music. He would sit for hours listening to the recordings that colonists played, his head tilted in concentration. Mika preferred the gardens, helping human children plant seeds and watching them grow with endless patience. But not everyone was happy with the peace. Greg Palmer watched the mixing of species with growing anger. He gathered a group of like-minded settlers in secret meetings, talking about how the colony was being contaminated, how Jake was too weak to lead, how they needed to take action before it was too late. Among the Vryn, a warrior named Vex harbored similar thoughts. He had been part of the war party that found Helen with the cubs, and he had disagreed with Threx's decision to stand down. Vex believed the Alpha had been influenced by sentiment, that the cubs' trust had clouded his judgment. He spoke to other young warriors about honor and tradition, about how their ancestors would be ashamed of making peace with killers. Palmer and Vex should have been enemies, but they found each other through intermediaries who traded between the colony and Vryn villages. They met in secret in the forest, two individuals from different species united by their belief that peace was impossible. They made plans, careful plans, that would force their leaders to abandon this foolish coexistence. Meanwhile, the colony flourished in ways no one had expected. Vryn hunters taught humans how to track the native game animals, which ones were safe to eat and which were sacred to their culture. Humans shared their farming techniques, helping Vryn plant crops that could feed more people with less work. Jake recorded daily logs of the progress, amazed by how quickly barriers fell when both sides tried to understand instead of dominate. "We came here expecting to tame a wilderness," he said into his recorder one evening. "Instead, we found teachers. Kaidara is not humanity's world or the Vryn's world. It belongs to both of us, and we're learning to share it." Sophie started a program where human children and Vryn cubs learned together. They played games, shared meals, and slowly grew up thinking of each other as neighbors rather than aliens. The cubs were natural ambassadors, their innocence breaking down prejudices that adults clung to. One evening, Helen sat with Kessa outside the medical center, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The cubs played nearby with human children, their laughter mixing in a sound that had no species. "I was so scared that night," Helen admitted. "When I decided to go find you, I thought I would probably die." Kessa made the Vryn gesture for deep affection, a sort of half bow with one hand over her heart. "You gave me life. You gave my cubs their mother back. Among my people, this creates bond deeper than blood. You are packed now, Helen. Always." Helen felt tears in her eyes again, but these were happy tears. "I was just doing what any doctor would do." "No," Kessa said firmly. "You did what few would dare. You crossed into enemy territory, unarmed and alone to save a stranger. That is not just doctor. That is hero." The two friends sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. Neither of them knew that their peace was about to be tested. Neither suspected that members of their own communities were plotting to destroy everything they had built. The storm was coming, and it would take everything they had learned about trust and forgiveness to survive it. But for that moment, watching cubs and children play together under alien stars, Helen allowed herself to hope. Maybe different species could learn to live together. Maybe fear and hatred were not the only options. Maybe the future could be built on something better than blood and violence. The cubs' laughter echoed across the compound, a sound of pure joy that needed no translation. The explosion ripped through the construction site at dawn. Jake ran from his quarters to find 3 colonists injured and a joint project destroyed. The building was supposed to be a shared meeting hall, built by both humans and Vryn working together. Now it was rubble and smoke. Worse, the blast pattern showed it had been set deliberately. Sophie arrived seconds later, already scanning the debris with her equipment. She found the evidence quickly. A human-made explosive device triggered remotely, but scattered around the blast site were Vryn claw marks and a piece of fabric from Vryn clothing. Someone wanted it to look like the Vryn had attacked. The compound erupted in anger. Colonists who had accepted the peace now questioned it. Palmer seized the moment, his voice booming across the common area. "See, I told you this would happen. The wolves pretend to be our friends, then they stab us in the back. We need to drive them out before they kill us all." Jake tried to maintain order, but doubt crept into his mind. The evidence seemed clear. Could Threx have been playing them all along? Had the whole piece been a trick to lower their defenses? He called an emergency meeting, ordering increased security and limiting contact with the Vryn. What Jake did not know was that at the same moment, Threx was dealing with his own crisis. A Vryn outpost had been attacked in the night. 2 warriors were wounded, and the attackers had left behind human weapons and boot prints. The evidence pointed clearly to human treachery. Vex stood before the Pack Council, his voice full of righteous anger. The Alpha was fooled by cubs and soft hearts. The humans never wanted peace. They wanted us to lower our guard so they could strike when we were weak. We must answer this attack with strength. Threx felt his world cracking apart. The evidence was damning. Human weapons, human tracks, human tactics. But something felt wrong. The attack was too obvious, too perfect in its evidence. Real attacks were messy, confusing. This felt staged. "We do not act until I speak with the human Alpha," Threx announced, his voice hard as stone. The cubs trusted them. "I will not throw away that trust without being certain." But before he could send messengers, another incident occurred. A Vryn hunting party was ambushed near the human compound. They fought back and injured a human guard. The guard claimed the Vryn attacked first. The Vryn claimed they were defending themselves. No one knew who was telling the truth. The fragile peace shattered. Jake ordered all Vryn to leave the compound immediately. Threx pulled his people back into the forest and forbid any contact with humans. The colony and the pack stood on the edge of war once again, and both sides believed they were the victims. Helen refused to accept it. She knew Threx, knew Kessa, knew the cubs. They would not betray the peace they had worked so hard to build. She gathered Kyle and Danny, the 3 of them meeting in secret in her medical center. "Something is wrong," Helen said firmly. "All these attacks happen too perfectly. The evidence is too clean. Someone wants us to go to war." Kyle nodded, pulling up data on his pad. "I've been tracking movement patterns. Look at this." On the night of the first explosion, Greg Palmer was not in his quarters. He signed out for a perimeter patrol, but the guards say he never checked in with them. Danny added his own findings. "I reviewed the weapons logs. The guns found at the Vryn outpost were reported missing 3 days ago. Palmer was on duty in the armory that day. They needed proof and they needed allies." Helen sent a secret message to Kessa through a young colonist who the Vryn had learned to trust. The message was simple. "Meet at the clearing, midnight, come alone. Something wrong." Kessa arrived with a Vryn scout named Jax, a clever tracker who had become friends with Kyle during their joint patrols. Jax had his own suspicions about the attacks. "The human tracks at our outpost were too deep," he explained through translation. "Whoever made them was heavier than normal humans. They wore your boots but walked like Vryn on the balls of their feet. The pieces started coming together, someone from each species, working together to destroy the peace. It made horrible sense. The best way to start a war was to make both sides believe they were under attack. They split up to gather evidence." Helen and Kessa searched the blast site again, looking for anything Sophie's team might have missed. Kyle and Jax tracked movement patterns, mapping out where the attackers must have come from and gone. Danny pulled security footage, looking for gaps and inconsistencies. It took 3 days of careful investigation, but they found it. A recording from a motion sensor camera near the forest edge showed Palmer meeting with Vex, speaking in low voices, exchanging materials. The timestamp was the night before the first explosion. They had the proof they needed, but proof meant nothing if they could not get their leaders to see it. Palmer had significant support in the colony, and Vex was a respected warrior. Accusing them without absolute certainty could backfire and make things worse. Helen made a decision. She gathered her evidence and walked directly to Palmer's quarters. She knocked on the door, and when he opened it, she pushed past him inside. Kyle and Danny followed, weapons drawn but not aimed. "We know what you did," Helen said quietly. "We have recordings. We have tracks. We have weapon logs. You sabotage the peace because you believe war is inevitable. But you're wrong, Greg. War is only inevitable if we choose it." Palmer's face turned red with rage. You don't understand. I've seen what happens when colonies trust aliens. I watched my entire settlement burn because we were too weak to strike first. These wolves will turn on us eventually. I'm just making sure we survive when they do. The Vryn are not your old enemy, Helen replied. Threx chose peace when he could have chosen revenge. Kessa forgave the man who shot her. The cubs trusted us with their lives. You're not protecting the colony, Greg. You're destroying the best chance we have for a real future here. Palmer reached for his gun, but Danny was faster. The young security officer who had started this whole mess with his fearful shot now stepped forward to end it. No, Danny said firmly. I made one mistake that almost destroyed everything. I won't stand by while you make it worse. You're under arrest. At the same time, Kessa and Jax confronted Vex in the Vryn village. They showed Threx the evidence they had gathered, the proof that Vex had been working with a human to create false attacks. Threx's rage was cold and terrible, but it was not directed at humans. It was focused on the warrior who had betrayed his own pack. You endangered cubs, Threx said, his voice shaking with controlled fury. You made me doubt the trust they showed. You used our dead as tools for your ambition. There is no greater dishonor. Vex tried to argue, tried to claim he was protecting the pack from future betrayal, but the other warriors would not listen. Trust was sacred among the Vryn. Breaking it was the worst crime imaginable. Jake and Threx met at the clearing the next morning, both leaders bringing their prisoners. Palmer and Vex stood before their peoples facing judgment together. It was Helen who spoke first, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd of humans and Vryn. These two believed that our species could not coexist. They believed war was inevitable. They created the very conflict they claimed to fear. But they were wrong. We can choose differently. We have chosen differently. The question is whether we will let fear and hatred win, or whether we will be brave enough to keep trying for peace. Rin and Mika pushed through the crowd, the cubs running to stand between the two groups. They looked up at the adults with confused, sad eyes. Mika spoke in her young voice words that Kessa translated. Why do grown-ups want to hurt each other? Playing together is so much better. Fighting makes everyone sad. The simple wisdom of a child cut through all the complicated arguments. Palmer looked at the cubs, then at the mixed crowd of humans and Vryn who had gathered. He saw colonist children holding hands with Vryn cubs. He saw Sophie and a Vryn scout comparing notes on their data pads. He saw a future he had been too afraid to imagine. I was wrong, Palmer said, his voice breaking. I let my fear control me. I'm sorry. Vex took longer to bend, but eventually he too lowered his head. I dishonored the pack. I dishonored the cubs' trust. I accept whatever judgment the Alpha gives. Threx and Jake conferred briefly, then announced their decision together. Palmer and Vex would be exiled from both communities. They would leave Kaidara on the next transport ship, removed from the world they had tried to destroy. It was mercy, though neither deserved it. But mercy was the foundation of the peace they were building. The weeks that followed brought real change. The colony and the Vryn formalized their alliance with the Kaidara Accord, a treaty that established shared territories, trade agreements, and mutual defense. A monument was erected in the center of the compound, a statue showing Helen asleep against a tree with the cubs on her chest. The inscription read simply, "The moment peace began." Jake stood before the monument on the day of its dedication, speaking to a crowd of both species. We came to this world thinking we would conquer it. Instead, it conquered us. It taught us that strength comes not from weapons, but from trust, that the fiercest warriors are those who choose peace. That family is not defined by species, but by who we protect and who protects us. Helen continued her work as bridge between the peoples, training both human and Vryn in medical techniques. Kessa became an ambassador,